Hello everyone, I am the Bandit Kirby. Welcome to my channel, the Commander Tavern. The Commander Tavern is a channel dedicated to my favorite Magic the Gathering format. Commander Cube Draft is a mini-series where I'm going to be talking about everything Cube Draft, but related specifically to the Commander format. Throughout this series, I'm going to be explaining the process behind how I brewed my own Commander Cube, as well as pointers on how to build your own. I'll also be reviewing and analyzing many topics and aspects when it comes to building your own cube. In this episode in particular, I'll be discussing Uncards and Playtest cards, analyzing them and giving some pointers on whether they should be included or not in a Commander cube. If you like any of the cards I'll be mentioning throughout the video, please consider using my TCG Player affiliate link when purchasing those cards. You can find that link down in the description. It'll really help out the channel. But the very best way you can help us with the channel is with my Patreon. There are plenty of perks for being a patron, such as early access to certain videos, exclusive deck text, gifts, and more for as little as $1. You can also support my channel for free by simply liking, subscribing, and sharing, which also helps out a lot. I put out a video every Monday, so you don't want to miss out. You can join my Discord server for free if you want to join the Commander Tavern community. All pertinent links are down in the description. Alright, let's get back to the episode. Since this mini-series is meant to show different aspects of drafting a Commander cube, if you want to see all the topics I've covered so far on it, I suggest you watch the playlist shown here. It already has plenty of episodes covering many other aspects of Commander cubing. Alright, without further ado, let's continue with this video's topic. First things first, I absolutely love Uncards and Playtest cards, especially in limited environments like Cube. To be fair, there are only a certain type of these cards I love, which I'll get to in a bit. Those cards add a fun, surprising, and wow factor to cubes since you're able to contain them within a sandbox type situation. Some of them are just for shits and giggles, while others can be particularly busted. That being said, if you were to refer to Scryfall, as of the making of this video, there are almost 1,000 Uncards and Playtest cards somewhat available. These include cards with silver borders, aircone stamps, and playtest cards for mystery booster sets, and literal stickered playtest cards from Gavin Verhey's Unknown events, which fire off exclusively in conventions. Due to Commander's ban list since inception, these cards are not legal by default. As such, you need to rule zero them into games with your playgroup. However, as a curator of your Commander cube, you can include whichever cards you want, even strictly banned cards, as I also went over in this video, which you can find for a link above. That being said, just as I mentioned in that video, be wary of the type of environment you're creating. If it's just for your group, then you know exactly what to add or not. However, if you want your cube to be enjoyed by as many people as possible, keep in mind how zany you want these banned cards to be. My analysis for these cards thus boils down not so much on the aesthetics of the card. For example, I will die on the hill that banning silver bordered cards by default was a mistake, especially if the spirit of the format was casualness, but that discussion is neither here nor there. Therefore, I will analyze these types of cards into 6 categories: parasitic, dexterity, outside the game, extra cards, meta elements, and viable. So let's start with parasitic cards and what that means, as well as the others thereafter. If you've already seen my video on partner type mechanics in Commander cubes, you'd recall that me suggesting to avoid these mechanics in a Commander cube altogether, especially one as vast as mine. In that case, partner with type mechanics are parasitic and problematic because you have to draft both cards to make the most of them. For example, if a player sees Paco in their current pack, they will have the expectation that Haldon is somewhere in the cube as well. However, there's no guarantee they'll see it there, especially if someone else picked Haldon expecting to also pick Paco. Granted, this case is particularly extreme, which is why Battle Bond packs are collated with both partners with cards in the same pack. You could also do that with your cube, but I already discussed that in that previous video, so I'll talk about others here instead. For example, mechanics involving attractions, contraptions, stickers, and host augment creatures. Some of these are even legal in Commander. There's even the argument of whether contraptions are legal because they don't have a silver border, don't have an acorn stamp, and there's already the legality of additional decks thanks to attractions. Yet that argument is moot simply because there is no legal way to assemble a contraption in Commander, at least as of the making of this video. However, even though there's a massive list of illegal yet mechanically viable cards in Commander, the problem with viable but parasitic mechanics is that if you draft attractions, then you're forced to also draft cards with effects that open attractions. This would be a very complex draft environment in a large singleton cube such as Commander cubes. You already have difficult decisions such as staying within your color identity, on top of drafting important cards like interaction, card advantage, mana acceleration, plus anything that synergizes best with the strategy you're developing. And this is true for all parasitic effects, such as contraptions and cards with effect that assemble them, sticker sheets and effects that place stickers and or give you tickets, and drafting augment creatures if you drafted any host creatures. You would essentially be forcing players to draft quote-unquote combo cards or otherwise have dead picks from their packs. Granted, some of these cards also just work on their own. For example, you can still use host creatures on their own without worrying about picking augment creatures, but you can't do anything with an augment creature if you didn't draft any host creatures. As for my own Commander Cube, Angelic Rocket is included even though there are no augment creatures in it, just because it works well on its own. Therefore, just as in past videos where I mentioned avoiding adding creatures that have partner with, the similar mentality is applied with these likewise parasitic effects. That being said, if your cube is relatively small and meant to be drafted with a small group, you might be able to pull one of these off, or even all of them if you wanted to. At the end of the day, your cube is yours, so build it as you see fit. However, do keep your participants' experience in mind when considering what to add to your own cube. So if you really loved contraptions, for example, you could collate your packs so that each pack is guaranteed to have 1 or 2 contraptions. Again, you could always build your cube however you wanted to. But for me, personally, I avoided all parasitic mechanics from my Commander Cube as much as I absolutely love attractions, contraptions, stickers, and host augment. Another type of mechanic that I would steer clear from are dexterity mechanics. In general, these can be super fun to include because it creates some excitement and, to be fair, have been in the game since alpha, being considered a normal part of normal gameplay. However, they might exclude some players who are unable to perform the action. Also, some are just outright annoying and miserable to play against, such as the gacha cards. Something else to keep in mind when determining the aggravation or annoyance factor are mini-games like eye-staring contests, arm wrestling, etc., since these might have players refusing to play, or having players do nonsensical actions they find unfun, like dancing the hokey pokey, singing, amongst other things. I am not immune to the fancifulness of these mechanics, though, since my Commander Cube does include a singular dexterity type card. Well, dexterity and minigame-esque, and that is Nerf War. The sole reason it's in here is because players have always found it fun. They are not playing with their own cards, so they don't have to worry about spiteful players ruining their decks. Also, I provide the Nerf gun that goes along with it. This isn't forcing players into weird side games, dexterity actions, saying or doing silly things, etc. They take a Nerf gun and shoot it at a library. That's pretty tame, all things considered. But if you want to include Falling Star, Cramped Bunker, Clay Pigeon, etc., go for it. It is your cube after all. As for myself, I feel like I excluded these types of effects most of all. Sure, there are those players who find these things fun. However, I wanted to keep things relatively tame when playing and drafting my Commander Cube, with firing a Nerf gun at a library being the most extreme thing. Granted, that's probably one of the most extreme things you can do in a Magic the Gathering game anyways. This brings me to the outside of the game elements. I categorize all cards that have you perform actions or require actions that depend from being outside of the game. These include things like asking someone outside of the game if they like squirrels, to telephoning someone, posting pictures on social media, asking people for high fives, gaining teammates from outside of the game, affecting other games, going to websites, etc. Some of these can follow along the same philosophy as the previously seen dexterity effects, since they require players to perform physical actions within the game being played. However, these take it a step further by also affecting other games or people outside of the game. Granted, you can always opt out of drafting or playing these cards if you don't like them, but the experience can still bog down games, especially when you have that min-maxer who's going to take these effects to the extreme. Some cards go even further, caring about the time, season, player's age and appearance, to even the clothes that they're wearing. That being said, some of these are relatively tame and can still add that fun factor for a select group of players without ruining the experience for those who don't enjoy them. For example, my own cube runs Mobile Clone, Urza's Funhouse, Urza Academy Headmaster, and, to a certain extent, Discord, Lord of Disharmony, and Standard Procedure, since you will undoubtedly need to rely on Scryfall to use them. I feel like these are relatively tame since everyone will undoubtedly have a smartphone, or at least access to one, so it shouldn't be an issue to use it within a game for more than just keeping track of life totals. Discord, Lord of Disharmony gives me a nice segue into the extra cards mechanic. What I mean by this category are cards that require you do more than have tokens at hand. Tokens aren't a problem since they disappear from the game whenever they leave the battlefield, unless you have Claire de Lune, but we'll discuss her in a moment. These effects require you to actually create cards that remain in the game after they've been created, conjured, etc., like Oracle of the Alpha or Born Rattler, for example. These quote-unquote problems can be solved with sleeved extra cards that you can slip pieces of paper in, sleeving infinite tokens, or even printing them onto label stickers onto basic lands, etc. Your imagination is the limit to how you can conjure cards and paper, or make tokens permanent due to Claire de Lune. I absolutely love that Gavin Verhey printed these Alchemy exclusive cards in Mystery Booster 2, since this effect already existed in paper with Gunk Slug and Bone Rattler. Since this is an easily solvable issue, some players might find it fun to have what are essentially permanent tokens added to a game. As for my own cube, I'm still on the fence as to include Claire in it or not. It does already run Bone Battler, but I'm also waiting for the secondary market to be realistic on the value of the Alchemy paper reprints, especially Oracle of the Alpha, Sigardian Evangel, and Turov's Disciple. Once they're affordable, I am 100% acquiring them for my in-paper Commander Cube. Interestingly, there's now a card that does the exact opposite. Intangible Vibes turns all creatures into tokens. That means that when they leave the battlefield, you have to remove them from the game, not exile them, literally take them out of the game. Unless you also have Clear the Loon when playing Intangible Vibes, then only you will get to keep your creatures. Wow, what an amazing combo. Now I really have to consider putting Clear back into my cube since I am running Intangible Vibes in it. The cards that fall within the meta element category are ones that refer to elements of a card dependent on its printing. For example, caring about expansion symbol, border color, watermark, artist, collector number, reminder text, flavor text, foil treatments, lines of rules text, etc. Some of these can be pretty strong like duh, if all or most of the creatures in your cube with abilities have reminder text. If your Commander Cube has a vast variety of sets and products included in it, then a card like Symbol Status is super strong here. This one is included in my Commander Cube and has the potential of creating a ton of tokens with little effort, making it amazing for a multiple of archetypes within my cube. These aren't as difficult to pull off as the previously shown parasitic effects, especially since something like expansions matter in Eternal Legal cards like City in a Bottle, Apocalypse Chime, and Golgothian Silex already exist. Since a lot of curators care about treatments, arts, and specific versions and printings of cards, you can run some of these meta-dependent effects in your cube to great success. I've seen plenty of vintage cubes include this version of Knight of the Kitchen Sink as an amazing beater for mono white weenies since it's basically a 2/2 unblockable creature with first strike for just 2 white mana. That being said, Symbol Status is the only meta-dependent card in my entire cube. If I wanted to include Duh, I could, but then I'd have to make sure that I'm including only the version of creatures with reminder text. That juice might not be worth the squeeze for me though. Last but not least are the viable uncards. I call this category viable because they include cards that fall within Maro Rosewater's own criteria for not being uncards. When designing Infinity, Maro used this criteria to determine whether the uncard would be Eternal Legal or not, meaning if it would or would not have the Acorn stamp. However, one could also retroactively apply this criteria when analyzing uncards printed before Infinity. For example, what about these particular cards here makes them illegal to play in Eternal formats apart from the color of their border? These cards have literal black bordered cards with the same exact text, almost word for word. Yet, the only problem with running these cards in the first row is in Constructed Commander because they're silver bordered. I have a long Twitter thread showing these examples and many more, which I've linked to in the description of this video for anyone who wants to see how ridiculous it is to blanket ban these cards solely because of the color of their border. But I digress. That's not what this video is about. The point is that even if you don't want your cube to be too wacky or too out there, you can still keep the seriousness of it and still include uncards as well as playtest cards too. Like Enchantmentize. If you were also running one with the stars and wanted to redo this effect but your cube is singleton, you can include the former as redundancy for the latter. Problem solved. The point of this category is that there are plenty of silver bordered cards and playtest cards that can easily be slotted into a cube and not worry about rules nightmares or anything like that. Not like there aren't any rules nightmares already legal in Eternal formats anyways, right? Looking at you, Layers Nightmares. In any case, a fun exercise might be to go through the almost 1,000 card list of cards not legal in Commander because they're either silver bordered, playtest cards, or have acorns. Hell, even the acorns ones too. And see if they're tame enough to meet your own cube's criteria, even if you want to strictly take Maro's guide. I guarantee that you'll find a whole new world of possibilities for your cube, not just mechanically and archetypically, but in entertainment and wow factor as well. If you haven't and want to take a gander at the current version of my Commander Cube, you can find links to it down in the description, where you can see both the online version of my cube as well as the one I curate in real life. I have way more topics to cover in greater detail and depth for this mini-series, so stay tuned. I would like to thank all my patrons for supporting me, and a quick shout out to all my higher tier patrons, the Brewers, for their patronage. I also want to thank anyone using my TCG Player affiliate link. And to everyone, thanks for watching this episode of Commander Cube Draft on the Commander Tavern. I am the Medic Kirby, and happy drafting.